Yeah, it was about 3 years ago, January 6, 2021. The Biden administration is still looking for more and more people to charge in order to destroy their lives, in order to fulfill one of the high holy days of the American left, January 6th. And among the people they're charging are journalists, conservative journalists who committed no acts of violence whatsoever, who didn't disrupt any proceeding of Congress, who were there merely to cover the events of that day. Among those people is my next guest. Steve Baker is a contributor to The Blaze, and he just got some jarring news this week. Steve, thank you very much for joining us today, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Steve, I, of course, saw your tweet like so many others. You indicated that your attorney was contacted by the FBI this week to let him know that you are going to be charged by the Justice Department. Why? For what?
Well, that we don't know yet. We don't know what the charges are going to be because the FBI agent declined to tell my attorney what they are. And he said, as his excuse for not disclosing that, is that he himself won't know what they will be until the magistrate signs off on the warrant itself. But this has been an ongoing process for me for 2.5 years. I was first contacted by the FBI in July of 21, so just 6 months after January 6th. And then I was threatened with prosecution by a assistant U.S. attorney out of Philadelphia in November. This was after we consented to an FBI interview. And then after their initial threat, which took place the week before Thanksgiving in November of 21, we didn't hear from them again for 20 months. And then I got a grand jury subpoena for all my videos that I took on January 1st, or January 6th, rather. And all of those videos were then, you're about to hear some sounds of the streets of Washington, D.C. here.
That's okay. We're familiar with those sounds.
Yes, you are. And so the bottom line is that I got this grand jury subpoena for my videos, which was absurd on its face because we had already voluntarily offered them 20 months earlier to the FBI. I had nothing to hide personally in the videos. They were just the content that I had recorded, and then my videos were used and licensed out to various news agencies and documentaries all over the world. So it was not a there was nothing to hide, but they chose to go forward with this grand jury subpoena charade. And so we complied, and we complied to the grand jury subpoena, and then we didn't hear from them again since August. And then all of a sudden, yesterday morning, I'm coming out of a couple of meetings at the Rayburn building that I was there working on with the stories that I'm developing right now here in D.C. And I get a text from my attorney saying, you need to call me. And a text from your attorney says, please call, is never really a good thing. So
yeah,
it seems like what we learned yesterday.
It's a big deal. So take me back to January 6th of 2021. Mm-hmm. You, at the time, as I understand it, were an independent journalist. You were covering the events of the day. You followed the story where it went inside the Capitol building, but you did not commit any act of violence. Or you didn't steal any of Nancy Pelosi's office supplies, nothing like that, right?
No, as a matter of fact, the first thing that the FBI agents who interviewed me in October of 21 said to me was, thank you for doing no violence against law enforcement that day. So this is on the record when we go through the discovery process, should I eventually be charged, as they've threatened on Tuesday, that I have to self-surrender. And that should we eventually go to trial and we eventually start having to preparing and we go through this discovery process, I'll be able to acquire the audio of that interview. And I'll be able to say and show that that's exactly what they said to me. But they, look, they have me on 1,000 different cameras. They have me on hundreds of cameras inside the Capitol. They have me on, God knows how many cell phones and other journalists that were inside the building.
Yes.
I mean, look, Vince, there were 60 journalists that entered the Capitol from the outside. So these were not people that were embedded and that were covering the certification of the election. These weren't people that were already there. These were people that came through windows, came through doors, mainstream, independents, left, right. Myself, I'm a libertarian, and never been a Trump supporter. And so all of these individuals that came in are just as liable or guilty of whatever crimes that they're putting out there, but they're obviously not administrating this justice fairly or equally, because this is a selective prosecution situation, because I work for a right-wing news service.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there really are a bunch of other reporters not being charged here. And so you think, I mean, my belief based on this is it's obviously political targeting. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I know that it's political targeting because I've covered quite a few of these trials. As a matter of fact, I've covered some of the independent journalists that have been already convicted, and some of them who have been sentenced, and some who have already even served multiple months of prison terms for doing nothing more than doing their jobs. I always go back to one case. He was the very first individual arrested in Florida. His name is J.D. Rivera, out of the Pensacola area. He was the first January 6th arrest in the state of Florida. And he was there as a contractor working as a videographer, as a photojournalist. This is what he does for a living, what he's been doing for a living since he retired from the Marines. And he had his professional gear. He wasn't recording on a cell phone. He had all of his expensive pro gear there. And he followed and tracked Luke Mogelson from the New Yorker. They basically paralleled each other throughout the Capitol. And they recorded the same thing, many of the same exact events at the same places inside the Senate, where the QAnon shaman was, praying and doing his thing inside the Senate chamber. But JD was arrested, and Luke Mogelson was not, because Luke Mogelson submitted his video, and he submitted his story to the New Yorker, and the title of his story was "Among the Insurrectionists." So with that title right there, he had his get out of jail free card, and unfortunately JD didn't have that going for him, and so consequently he got convicted in a bench trial and was then sentenced to 8 months in prison, of which he served 7 months for doing nothing more than doing what he was contracted and paid to, and did for a living.
So, I mean, obviously you're going to have to discuss all this with your attorney, so you may not have an answer to this just yet, but that sounds to me, just as a civilian, like selective prosecution, where you're being attacked by your government. They're clearly not going after other people who met the same exact standards as you did, and they're doing it on a political basis. If the government goes after you, do you plan on raising this as a defense?
Well, we plan on hitting it hard, but more importantly, we plan on hitting it hard in advance. We're going to try this case in the court of public opinion on that basis, because, Vince, I'm telling you, I've covered the independent journalist cases so far, and not one of them has been allowed to present the selective prosecution argument. In fact, there's a kid out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Stephen Horn. He was a young independent journalist. He was only 22 at the time. He's 25 now. He had acquired and been doing journalism. He had acquired press passes and press badges for various events since he was 16 years old. He came up here as an independent to cover this event. He followed the story where the story went. No violence, no insurrection-y kind of things in his behavior whatsoever. And this kid was convicted on the 4 basic misdemeanors. He decided to go to trial rather than taking a plea deal. He was not allowed to show the jury all of the press badges that he had acquired since he was 16 years old.
Yes. But it also strikes me that you really, as much as I think that does add weight to your argument, you shouldn't have to demonstrate that you have a long-standing career as a journalist in order to be able to make a case that you are entitled to a free press, to be considered part of the free press. Because, any citizen can conduct an act of journalism for the benefit of the public. And, there are people who capture these things who specifically are in there in an independent capacity, who want to capture this and share it with the public, and they should be respected as exercising their rights.
Well, that's absolutely correct. But, there have been some individuals who suddenly became a journalist that day. And I agree with your argument that anybody should be able to become an instant citizen journalist if what they've captured and what they've learned and which they are covering is of public interest and public consumption is something that people want to see and want to hear about. But there were people that said, hey, I'm doing my Facebook live stream and I became a journalist that moment. I understand the weakness of that argument, but the Department of Justice are bringing charges against people with a background and track. I have a 25-year history prior to January 6th of being a writer. I had many years of being an investigator. And then as the investigative journalism side of things started happening more frequently as a result of the COVID lockdowns, I started exercising that muscle, and then I decided to go to D.C. to see what was happening at that event. That again, me not being a Trump supporter, I was there out of my curiosity because he said things were going to be wild, and he also had indicated that maybe he was going to release some sort of information about this alleged stolen election, and I wanted to be there to interview people.
Of course, it was one of the most inherently newsworthy events in the country. If you're a journalist, you should want to be there to see what was going down.
So you would expect, if you have hundreds of thousands of people, obviously from the right side of the political aisle, you're going to expect that their journalists are going to be there covering that. And then, obviously, because it's in D.C., you're going to still have the mainstream media Mockingbird crowd there as well.
Yeah.
They're going to be covering their side of the things. But that's exactly what's happening in this process. Is if you were submitting your stories to the right publication or the right media source, and you were comporting your stories to the preferred narrative, then you're not getting charged. But they're only being charged from the other side of the political spectrum.
So I'm curious how much support you're getting, Steve. As you pointed out, you're ready to go. I mean, this is why you're talking to me today. You want to make sure that the public knows about this and can assess it. Are you finding that the people are supporting you? Is your employer, are the Blaze supporting you? What does this look like? What kind of army do you have with you as you go into this trial, to this challenge?
I'll tell you. Glenn Beck this morning had me on the program this morning, and through the entire weight of his media empire behind me, my editor-in-chief, he wrote an op-ed for the Blaze Media this afternoon, and through the weight of the company behind me. So I'm very blessed, and
that's excellent.
I'm blown away. I mean, these guys got behind me with everything. And then, the outpouring of support that I've had elsewhere throughout, social media and friends and family have just been phenomenal. Look, I've had over 2 years to emotionally prepare for the inevitability of this day, but obviously always hoping that it wouldn't come. Always praying every morning, please, Lord, let this cup pass from me.
Yes.
But you know what? If I've got to go through it and I've got to carry the torch on a grand First Amendment fight here, well, then that's what I'm going to do.
Well, God bless you for it. And I really do hope people come out and support you in the face of this. This is explicit injustice, and they just don't stop. It's insatiable. There's Matthew Graves and Joe Biden, Merrick Garland. They want to really demonize anything that doesn't fall in line, and they're using the Justice Department to do it. It's as grotesque as anything we've seen in our lifetimes. And right now, Steve Baker, it seems like you're bearing the brunt of it. We'll stay in touch with you, Steve. As long as you can chat with us about it, we'll be grateful to have you with us.
Absolutely, Vince. We're looking toward, I would invite everyone to go look me up on the Blaze, look me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at TPC4USA. That's TPC, the number 4 USA. And follow our stories on the Capitol Police. We have done the most revelatory stories of corruption and perjury in these January 6th trials of any media organization, and that's been our work. In fact, I've been for the entire week here at the Capitol working on the CCTV room of that renowned 41,000 hours worth of video. That's where me and my Blaze crew has been all week this week.
Well, in case you're wondering why they're targeting Steve Baker, Steve, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today, sir.